let's talk about this. Never let a good crisis go to waste, all right? So, let's talk about 9/11. Oh, that's not a good opening. Let's talk about post 9/11 and the Patriot Act, okay? Now, before anybody gets in here and says, oh, God, Stocky's siding with this person or that side or whatever, let's try this again, okay? They say sex sells, and it does. But sex sells nowhere near as much as fear, okay? I could sell you boner pills. They still get sold in gas stations because people still buy them. I could sell you a lot of things. I could sell you a dream of making money so women will love you and like you. Because there's no such thing as an ugly man, only a broke man. But fear will sell much more. Why do you think people in the finance world are able to make so much money selling shit to you on the idea that you're going to die broke and that the only way to be rich is to trade options on the daily at $60 a month? Okay? Or the fear that you're going to die alone, so then you'll buy this to make someone attracted to you. Whatever. Fear sells. It is easy to make things happen under the guise when people are scared. So post 9/11, the Patriot Act came in. The Patriot Act gave the government the ability to survey and surveil on American citizens unlike anything. I mean, it was almost out. I'm not saying that it's all bad, but it was almost like out of the book 1984. Because no one was going to stop it. Everyone was so scared and afraid that no one was going to stop and be like, hey, you're violating my rights. It's, oh my God, I don't want a terrorist to get me too. So they got the ability to collect all your data, all your records. They didn't need to go to a judge for a warrant. They could just get an electronic warrant via special access. They could lock you up indefinitely under just the accusation that you were planning terrorism, whatever. There was a lot of things that could that happened with the Patriot Act. And as the war waned on and people got further and further away from the events of 9/11 and people started to question things, people started getting upset about it. And they started saying, wait, this is against our rights, and we have the right to freedom and free speech, and we have the right to privacy. And remember, the Fourth Amendment was the big one here. This is unreasonable searches and seizures. So for those of you guys that are European, the Bill of Rights is not something that the government gives us as rights. It's rights that we're inalienable born with that the government can't touch, right? It's a reminder to the government that, hey, you can't fuck with us. Well, part of that, the Fourth Amendment, is the right. You have the right against unreasonable searches and seizures. In other words, you can't the government or a government entity, whether it's police or federal, but it can't just search your property or detain you without reasonable cause, right? Like they have to have evidence and they have to go to a judge and get a warrant, or they have to have reasonable suspicion that you're committing a crime or you have committed a crime. They can't just stop you, lock you up, and do shit like that, right? And a lot of people give me shit when I say, well, America has this freedom, and they say, well, we have the same freedoms in other countries. You don't. You don't. I mean, just look at what happened in England, right? Like a girl was autistic girl, whatever, was drunk and was being brought back home, and she said that a female officer looked like a lesbian, and 7 cops busted into the house and arrested her, right? Because of that. It seems like it until something happens, right? Canada is taking away. It happens. But we have our own problems in the U.S., don't get me wrong. But so the Fourth Amendment. And so this seemed like a clear violation of it. But because it got passed during this time of fear, it was like a little too late. So then everybody was really upset and said this is a Republican thing and the Republicans are doing it, whatever. Then Obama became into office. Well, they actually enhanced the Patriot Act under a new name called the National Defense Authorization Act. Okay, which gave him even more power. Okay? And it keeps getting reauthorized, and it gives the government more power under the idea that we have to be able to stop terrorism and crime before it happens, and we can't do that unless we're able to collect data. And for the most part, it's used in what most people would think is a reasonable way, right? Like if there's somebody who's buying, fertilizer from one place and wiring from another and is searching, the anarchist cookbook, and then they're also taking trips to different government buildings and there's parking tickets. You kind of put that together and say, okay, we should surveil this guy, right? But there's others where everyone's records are being kept. And the argument to this is, well, if you got nothing to hide, you shouldn't be worried about it. Well, that sounds good on paper, but at the same time, it's not about if I shouldn't be have anything to hide, I shouldn't be worried. It's these are my rights, though. Whether I'm doing something right or wrong, if I give up my right and I don't fight for it, then what if there's another right that I do care about? I'm a gun owner, or I like to say things that are controversial, or I like to, I don't know, whatever. So there's a big argument there. Well, part of the NDA and Patriot Act allows for surveillance of record keeping. Like they can't open the records, but they can collect it as long as it's blanket. Now, a big thing came up during Apple. For those of you guys who remember, when Apple, there was actually a domestic / I guess international, but it was a domestic person, terrorism in California. And the FBI wanted to access the records of the individuals that committed the crimes. And Apple said no. And that caused a huge ordeal. Apple stood their ground for a while, and then Apple became everyone's hero because they're standing up for our rights. And even though these people didn't do something wrong, these people want access, they can't do it. It became a big thing. It wasn't the Boston bomber. It was the man and woman Muslim couple in California. But it was a big deal. And so the government decided the next time they were going to authorize the NDA to give themselves a backdoor to that as well. So whatever. Now that I've given you all this, this is where we come into play with TikTok. San Bernardino, yeah. Okay. Now, I could bring up other examples like the TSA. TSA costs us tens of billions of dollars. And so far, the TSA has not prevented a single attack that we can find, or has not thwarted a single terrorist attack on the airlines, but has had over 8,000 TSA agents fired or arrested for stealing things. Okay? I'm not getting into a libertarian or a Republican or Democratic or a freedom versus non-freedom of come and take it. And, those who will give up freedom for security will have neither. Or if you want to be safe and have safety and food and shelter and bed and medical and everything like that, you can have that. You can go to prison and get it, but you give up one thing, your freedom. I know all the talking points, but that's not what I'm here for, okay? So let's go to TikTok. So a couple years ago, they said they want to ban TikTok because the Chinese government, right? Chinese government is using this app to collect data on American citizens and put it in databases, right? What are they going to do with that data? Who knows? Whether all companies collect data, right? All companies collect data. They sell you stuff. But people are saying, what if they use this in a targeted for attacks, or if they want to, I don't know, do espionage, or they want whatever. So that was the case. And so they were thinking about banning it, and then they said, you know what? No, what we're going to do is we're going to take the U.S. TikTok, the U.S. Sector of TikTok, and force Tencent to give up that property to U.S. companies. And we saw Walmart and Oracle and Amazon, all these other companies jump in on that. And then that didn't go through, and now it's kind of gotten quiet, except Montana banned it, but that's a whole other story. So that brings us to today. It's like, wait a second, the government wanted it. They didn't want to ban it. They just wanted to have control over it. And some people were praising this, saying, good, then our government will have the ability to collect the data as well. Wait, what? So now we're hearing that according to drafts between the Committee on Foreign Investments and TikTok, that the U.S. government wanted control over this, partially to have access to the information of U.S. citizens. It says, according to the draft agreement dated summer 2022, it would have given the U.S. government agencies like the Department of Justice and the Department of Defense complete access to TikTok's operations, significantly more than any other social media company. It would let the agencies examine TikTok's U.S. facilities, records, servers with minimal prior notice and veto the hiring of any executives involved with leading TikTok U.S. data security organization. It would let the U.S. agencies block changes to the app's term of service in the U.S. and order the company to subject itself to various audits, all on TikTok's dime. And in extreme cases, the agreement would allow the government organizations to demand TikTok temporarily shut off functioning in the U.S. So they didn't agree. And now it's gotten quiet because I think there were too many U.S. young voters who were probably going to be upset if it got blocked. So what basically, for those who weren't paying attention, was saying is that the U.S. agencies were going to have full control over it, have access to all the data, short term be able to ask for anything they wanted on any user, would have to be given to them, and could have shut down the app anytime they want. And because it's technically owned, parent company is a foreign company, it would allow for some skirting of the rules that we have. Now, I'm not here to say that that doesn't already happen with some companies in the U.S., okay, because I'm not trying to put a tinfoil hat on here, but a lot of these companies that should have been taken down by the government for antitrust or for whatever seem to be getting away with some stuff, but also seem to be kind of iffy on what they allow and don't allow and when they allow it. So I don't know, but seems a bit fishy. You know? Now, again, one thing to keep in mind, though, before you jump on the government censorship train, also remember a lot of these are private companies. And for my international people, the quote-unquote First Amendment does not apply to private corporations. Okay? For example, I do not work for Twitch. I do not work for Amazon. I work with them. I am contracted. I make money, and I give them a portion of my money in return for hosting. Sorry, Lord. I give most of my fucking money to them in return for hosting this space, right? So I don't work for them. But if I come in here and I drop racist, homophobic, sexist, or terroristic things, or do something that is against their terms of service, they have the right to shut off my ability to stream because I'm streaming on their platform. And I can't say, well, that's against my freedom of speech. Because this is only telling the government that they can't fuck with me, not private businesses. So private business could shut me down. Now, I could sue them in court and say this is, I could sue them civilly, but not criminally. And at the same time, it's part of a contractual agreement. Once again, that's a civil lawsuit. For example, do you want to know why Twitch doesn't keep their terms of service very black and white? Everybody's like, oh, I wish they'd be more transparent. Let me tell you the secret here. If they do it black and white and they ban you and there's any bit of like, oh, this wasn't, prohibitively, put in the contract that I can't do this, they can get turned around and sued by a creator who can say, this is how I make my living. We had a contract. It does not say specifically in this contract that this is allowed or isn't allowed, and therefore I want access back in, I want compensation, and I want punitive damages, and Twitch would be getting sued like a motherfucker. But by keeping it somewhat gray, it gives them plausible deniability and gives them the ability to be like, well, that fell under sexual content. And you'd be like, well, what are you talking about? I was in a bikini. Well, we saw the outline of your penis. Okay, but it didn't show my penis. Well, technically that's sexual content. I know most of you guys wouldn't have that problem, but that's sexual content. Now, if they would have said showing penis and not outlined, then I could sue them, or I could at least take them to court, and they'd be hitting lawsuits all the time. Okay? No, but you can show it on YouTube and you'd be fine? What? Y'all are on one today. All right. So back to that. So when YouTube went around and said, we are not going to allow the, quote, what they said, the spread of misinformation on COVID vaccines or something like that, right? A lot of people got upset. They said, well, that's censorship. Well, yes and no. Technically, it's a form of censorship because, you know, they're not allowing people to say things which could or could not be misinformation or not, but they're a private company. And so the question becomes, do people stop using their services because they made a change, or do they continue to use it? That's why we call it a free market. It's not really a free market anymore, but a free market is people will vote basically with their dollars and with their traffic. But it was misinformation, though? Well, I'm sure there was a lot of misinformation, but there's probably some information that's unknown that gets caught up in that, right? We'll know, 20 years down the road how much of it was or was not. But it wasn't just about the vaccine, or it wasn't just about that. There were people that were also were saying, hey, this mask mandate for outdoor seating is bad because it's killing businesses and we shouldn't have this. That was flagged under misinformation. So there were some things that were just caught, but it's just like a big net that caught a lot of stuff. One thing I like about Twitter over the past year or two is that they allow community notes, right? This is what I like. I like the idea of community notes. Now, don't get me wrong, community notes can easily be misinformation as too. But community notes are awesome because it allows people to see something, but then also in big bold gets hey, this is wrong according to this, or this is misinformation. I like that. You can't do that with everything, but I like the idea of a company not censoring stuff, but allowing the community to rebuke it or debate it live. Now, don't get me wrong. People mess with it all the time. My favorite is when a political figure posts something and gets roasted. Like when Biden keeps posting over and over again that I reduced the deficit by 1.5 trillion, more than anyone in history. And every time there's a community note that goes, this is misleading. This accounts for future COVID spending that is no longer being spent, or something along those lines, depending on whatever it is. So it's like you get some accountability, right? Like saying, oh, I reduced the deficit by 1.5 trillion. No, you didn't. It's just 1.5 trillion of deficit spending that is no longer going to be spent because we ended COVID. So therefore, it was there and now it's gone. And so you see that. But you see abuses on this too sometimes. You'll see somebody come out and say something, especially somebody, let's say, right-leaning, for example, because a lot of people in certain areas happen to have one, political leaning or the other. They'll come out and say something like, I don't know. For example, they'll say, Biden is responsible for, I don't know. I don't want to get too political here, but they'll say something Biden has done that's wrong or is bad, and the community notes will be like, this is false, and then they'll bring up something, and then you'll look at it and be like, well, that's also false. Or the opposite as well. I'm just using this example as a tweet that I keep seeing that's fucking hilarious, right? Or like when Trump comes in and says, I was the greatest president ever because my quick response to COVID saved so many lives, and then somebody will come in and be like, this president also drew a marker about where a hurricane was going to go. It can be funny and it can be informative at the same time. So there's ways of doing it, but once again, it is a private company. In TikTok's case, the U.S. government wanted to take control of a private company, and therefore, if the government has control or access to it, it no longer becomes private, and then you have a fucking problem. Because now you are getting into right violations. But if you have a bill like the NDAA, during a fearful time, we gave up some of those rights. Here we go. I could sell you boner pills. Let me drink my hibiscus water.